Kathleen Dayus was a working class woman, an enameller, a businesswoman and a successful writer late in life. She was born in 1903. She grew up in poverty, in very hard times in the jewellery quarter. She lived in a back-to-back house, which was the common experience of poorer Brummies. Back-to-back houses were literally one house with another at the back, sharing a back wall. So there was no back window, no back door. One room downstairs with a tiny scullery, usually over a cellar head, and two small bedrooms upstairs. They were thrown up with inferior materials, dirt instead of sand for the mortar, horse's hair to go on the walls. Nearly 200,000 people lived in them. That was a city the size of Salford or Bolton or Cardiff, a city within a city. Like so many other working class youngsters, Kathleen left school as soon as she could and at 14 was at work. And she started off in press work but eventually moved into the jewellery trade enamelling, and she was a very good worker. She was married young and she had children young, but the 1930s were very hard times for her. Her husband was very ill, he died. She couldn't get a widow's pension because her husband had not paid enough in to the system. So she went on what was called the parish, and to try and supplement that meagre income, she sold firewood and she was found out by the authorities. They stopped her money. Things were so bad that she thought she would have to let her children go to Dr. Barnardo's for a while till she got herself back on her feet. Sadly, without her knowledge and without her consent, they were sent away for 8 years, and it took her 8 years to fetch them back. During that time, she strove to get down to Essex to see them. And in the meantime, back in Brum, she worked in various enameller shops, learning all aspects of the trade. She got a real determination to be her own boss. She wanted to show Barnardo's that she was a worthy mother and that she could look after her kids. So instead of just learning one aspect of the enamelling trade, which meant she would always be employed, she went from enameller to enameller and picked up different skills, and she started to save and save and save. And by 1937, she had the sum of £100, which meant that she could start up on her own and be her own gaffer. And that's how she got her kids out. Kathleen's literary career started later in her life. As she would recall, she began scribbling down some notes about her childhood because one of the grandchildren says, "Nan, write this down." And then, a few years later, one of the grandkids showed that manuscript to John Rudd, and he passed it on to Virago. And Virago, of course, would become famed for pushing forward the work of women. And the book came out. Her People begins with Our Yard. It's a chapter about the people that she grew up with. And it moves on to tell about various escapades and adventures, as well as day-to-day life. It was an important book because it was written by a working class woman. That's quite rare. It was even rarer in the 1980s. She grew up in the era when Birmingham was proclaimed as the best governed city in the world, following the astounding mayoralty of Joseph Chamberlain. But she shows the dire conditions in which so many poorer working class Brummies still had to live. It brings almost a novelistic feel to it, but there is still that authenticity of the spoken word of a working class woman. Kathleen's later years were very much more comfortable than her early years. She went around giving talks, particularly to groups of elderly people. She went on to write a number of other books, and all of them are strong. But for me, as a historian, I keep going back to Her People. And her legacy is that she brought alive the vitality, the humanity, the strength of spirit of backstreet Brummies.
You can read more about Kathleen Dayus on the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography website. You can access the resource free of charge using your local library's subscription.